connecting, a little bit of playing, I want to introduce our next speaker. Grand Lum is the director of the Department of Justice's Community Relations Service. And this department is known as America's peacemaker. The CRS has worked on with thousands of communities over the years, many of whom came together in crisis and emerged stronger and more unified. So CRS delivers 4 services: mediation of disputes, facilitation of dialogue, training and consulting. Grand will share more about the work of CRS. Welcome, Grand.
And I'd like to thank you, Susanna, for certainly that very warm introduction and welcome, but also getting you guys to stand up and move around a little bit so you don't get bored by what I'm going to say. But I do appreciate that, and I want to give a round of applause to both the co-MCs. I think they've done a wonderful job so far here. Thank you. It is a hard job facilitating a group of facilitators, right? So we do understand that. I do want to thank Sandy as well, the whole team, for certainly inviting me here to speak. I consider it quite the honor, and also for your leadership of NCDD. I have long admired NCDD because you are the one organization that's bringing together the active and influential public thought leaders on civic engagement and on public engagement. And I think that's so important. And I think the previous speaker said that it's hard to speak right after lunch, right? So again, it was appreciated what Susanna said, but it's also, when I was here on Friday, what I saw there, the energy that you all bring, the true excitement that you all have, I knew this would be easy. I knew this would be just a place where we could have a conversation amongst us. So I do want to say, on behalf of the President and the Attorney General, Eric Holder, that what you all do is remarkable work. And you help people solve their own problems. And that's what this administration has stood for as well. And you're the people in this room who are at the vanguard of that movement, that nurtures and really brings forth the voice of the American people. And what I would say is that we need more of that in this country. And when I say the we, I do mean the United States of America. Whether it's mental health, education, or budgeting, we need citizens who are informed, engaged, and involved, right? And what's fun for me when I come to a conference like this is I get to see a number of mentors and colleagues. So I get to see folks like Terry and Lisa Amsler, who have known for ages, to Bill Potopchik, Carolyn Penny, and folks like that. But I also get to meet new leaders, right? I get to meet people like Kiva Hummel, Manisha Padel, right here as well. Now, the one difference is when I meet the newer folks like Manisha, she wants to take a picture with me because she doesn't know me. People like Terry, they go, what's the big deal? I've known you forever. So that's the big deal. But the commonality is that you're all bringing people to the table, right? And whether this is Austin, Texas, whether this is Dubuque, Iowa, whether it's Davis, California. And when I come here to this meeting, I think about how fortunate those communities are to have you all working there. And what I'd like to talk a little bit about today, at least, is how CRS has been doing that for 50 years. And we have been doing a number of things, as was mentioned earlier, but I do want to focus on the dialogue piece, the facilitation of dialogue that CRS has done for half a century, that I think has made a huge difference in this country. So on August 18th, 2014, that was 10 days after the Michael Brown shooting, the President delivered a statement from the White House. And it was about both two things. It was about ISIL and about Ferguson. And I actually want to take a direct quote. The President does not mention Community Relations Service very often. and he did here. But it's also the words that he said along with it. He said, we've also had the experts from DOJ's Community Relations Service working in Ferguson since the days after the shooting to foster conversations among local stakeholders and resolve tensions among the community. So he explicitly talks about the work that we all do here, right? On that day, he ended his speech by saying, and again I quote, "It requires we listen and not just shout. That's how we're going to move forward together, by trying to unite each other and understand each other and not simply divide ourselves from one another. We're going to have to hold those values in the days ahead. That's how we bring about justice, and that's how we bring about peace." That was a pretty nice thing for him to say, right? That was pretty good. And I want to take that word justice for a moment. I did not realize it before I joined the Department of Justice, but when I came to the Department of Justice, someone told me, this is the only government agency whose name has a moral value to it, justice. And as all of you know, the Department of Justice, what it's known for is litigation, right? It's America's lawyer. It's about prosecution of wrongdoers, which is hugely important. It's hugely important. And yet, if you think about what the president said, it's the idea that because we listen to each other, that we can bring about justice. And I think the staff, and I'll introduce them to you shortly, we have 3 staff members from Community Relations Service here today, and the folks, and I think everyone in this room believes in the idea that by giving people the voice, that justice and peace aren't just about fighting each other, and though that can be a very important thing, it's the fact that people can work out their issues on their own and that justice will come about because of the common sense of the people. And, you know, without a doubt, one of the most important things we're doing in Ferguson is facilitating dialogue. I'm not going to be able to say a lot about Ferguson because of confidentiality and because of the fact that it's an ongoing situation. But what has been publicly reported is that we have run several sessions between Ferguson residents and Ferguson officials about how to move forward. And there has been discussion about communication, there has been discussion of trust, and there has been discussion about race. What's also certainly available publicly is the fact that we are facilitating and providing facilitation support to a group of Ferguson area leaders, law enforcement, nonprofits, community folks, who are meeting weekly to deal with this issue and making change. And even over this past weekend, the Columbus Day weekend, which I'm sure you probably saw in the news, we had 8 staff members who were there providing support in that situation to help maintain the peace. And for the most part, it was peaceful. And I'll say in general, stepping back from Ferguson, that in these types of situations, we work with law enforcement, we work with the community leaders, we work with government officials, we work with youth groups, and we convene meetings, we provide training, we mediate, we do shuttle diplomacy where it's needed, and it's made a difference. I want to step back and provide a little bit of historical context of how has it come to be that CRS plays this role. And CRS would not exist but for President Lyndon Baines Johnson. He came up with this idea in 1956. He modeled it after the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service. He asked Arthur Goldberg, who would later become a Supreme Court justice, to write the legislation involving this. As we all know, LBJ was the consummate negotiator, right? He was the guy who believed that people could work things out. And of course, he was a very complex person, right? I think one of his lieutenants said, you know, he was the 17 most interesting, most complex people he's ever met. And that was true. But I want, again, I'm not a person who uses quotes a lot, but I think it's important to frame this and to say the work that you all do around dialogue and deliberation, the work that we all do around that, what's its place in American society, in the American discourse? In one of the main issues that you guys discussed about is you need a larger platform, right, for this work. And it came across, I was in one of the conference sessions on partisan politics and how to get beyond that. So I think it's important to even actually have the words. And here's what Lyndon Baines Johnson said about community relations service and about the belief in communication. I think one of the lessons of American history is that in great crises and troublesome times invariably produce a breed who measure up to crises and who can master the times. The conciliator would perform the most important of all services, keep people in communication with each other. And I have a deep and abiding faith in the ability of people to solve any problem, so long as they are in communication. You know, that says something. That says something about the work we all do here in terms of the importance of people around the table. And I do want to say, I mean, I loved the presentation before us. CRS is 50 people today in 15 offices throughout the country. The team that's been here, we have learned an incredible amount of things from you. The idea, to me, the idea of using things like this to determine budgeting and to have a gamification of it, those are things we do not do. And I think it's so important to engage in this, and I want to talk too about how can we all contribute in the issues of the day. Given the limit of time, I'm not going to go through too much more of CRS's history, but I do want to say, many of you may be aware of CRS, many of you may not be aware of CRS. In the 70s, CRS was known as the cool it guys. They would go between the parties and say, cool it, right? That would have been sort of a hip Starsky and Hutch kind of thing to say, I think, during the time. But from the very beginning, it was communicating between parties, whether it was the march from Selma to Montgomery, where the first director, Leroy Collins, who was the former governor of Florida, talked directly to Martin Luther King to say, what are you going to do on the Pettus Bridge if the state troopers on the other side? It was going also to the state troopers, Colonel Lingo, and saying, will you let them pass? They did not get agreement, but the fact that somebody was there facilitating communication between the parties kept that second march safe after Bloody Sunday, after the first march. It is the Boston Public Schools in which one of the first female women conciliators, Silka Hansen at CRS, mediated and conciliated and facilitated dialogues, formed biracial parent groups between African American and white parents, and she did so at great risk. You know, Arthur Gary, the judge in that situation, was often on the the hit list by folks when that was published. Silka Hansen was number 2. It took courage to do that work. I do want to say that in 2000, we mostly have done race, color, and national origin work for most of the 50 years, but because of the Matthew Shepard James Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act, it expands to include gender identity, religion, sexual orientation, and disability. And we've done a lot of work since then on LGBT issues in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. I would like to ask now for the conciliators at CRS to stand up. I look good only because they make me look good. So I would ask them, Azika Jennings, Mildred Dupre de Robles, and Knight Soar. And please stay standing for one moment. I do want to say this. Please stay standing. So just to give you the sort of a sense of Mildred was 18 years in the Air Force before she came to CRS, and so has continued to serve her country. She was a conciliator who spent a significant and substantive amount of time on the Trayvon Martin Zimmerman trial, mediating and helping the state house from being taken over. Actually, there was a long takeover, and she was the person who helped mediate that one to conclusion, the students to leave. And we have Nightsor, who is our astrophysicist on our staff, who worked on chaos theory, which I think helps him a lot with the work that we do. And he does incredible work around the Human Relations Commissions in Pennsylvania. He'll be moving to Seattle very, very shortly for us as well. So we have some Seattle people here, thank you. And we have Azika Jennings, who for quite a bit of time was an assistant U.S. attorney in the Virgin Islands and has been in Ferguson quite a bit over the last 70-plus days. So again, can we give him one more round of applause here? I think they've been very well. I do want to talk about the theme of this conference basically in closing, which is what is democracy for the next generation, right? And I'll go back to that larger stage piece of it. And I think that is such a huge challenge for us. And I do believe that there are these larger issues, there are these special interests, there's all this money, there's all these things. It is a struggle. It is a struggle for CRS within a small agency, within the Department of Justice, within a large administration. It is a struggle for the work that you do in trying to change a budgetary process and in trying to change the citizens' engagement into a situation. It does mean partnering up. It does mean playing bigger. It does mean advocacy in different ways. The second piece, I don't know if it's a silver bullet, but one thing that you all focused on is the idea of technology. I think that's huge. The U.S. Institute of Peace has a Peace Tech Lab where they look at social media and they can actually figure out when conflict is likely to happen around the world based on their monitoring of social media using metrics. I think it's part of the future. One of my colleagues is a man named Colin Rule who worked at eBay and who's really been extraordinarily creative about how online dispute resolution is changing and that is, I absolutely think, as a person who's not the most tech savvy in the world, I do believe that's incredibly important. Here's what I want to commit to here with you all, is that we have offices, 10 regional offices throughout the country, 4 field offices, 1 headquarters. We have heard so much interest in the work that we do here. Let's have a meeting at every one of those offices with folks from NCDD and have a dialogue, right? That's what we do. So let's have a conversation about, you all bring tools that we can't even begin to imagine, and I think there's a way in which we can do this. And I'm going to end with one last quote here. It is from Lyndon Baines Johnson, and I think it captures what we all do. It is with the people and the communities of this nation that really the ultimate responsibility lies. It rests in their hearts. It rests in their sense of decency and fair play. Above all, it rests in their common sense. That's what CRS has done for half a century. That's what you all have committed your lives to, I think, right? You're the vanguard of giving the public voice a true seat at the American table. Let me ask you a question. Are you with me on that? Yeah. Are you all in? Let's bring it. Thank you very much.